This is episode 37 of the Shame Proof Your Life podcast, the one where I talk about Mr. Thornton. I'm your host and life coach, Danita Bremer. Have you ever received a prompting that you ignored for a long time, like 17 years? This podcast is that for me. I'm telling my stories, I'm learning from my past, and I'm inviting you along for the ride. My intention is that you will find hope, relief, and understanding by listening to my stories. Okay, so yesterday was my son's 13th birthday. He is the baby in the family, and I am so sad that he's a teenager. All my kids are teenagers, couple of years of that. I don't know, for some reason, it just is so tender and like a little bit of a grief for me. I tease him and I tell him that he will always be my baby, even though he's not a baby. And we go back and forth about that, but I think he kind of likes it. Okay, so today I want to talk to you about a person in my life who has had tremendous influence, probably without really knowing the extent of his influence on me. And I'm coming at you with this story because yesterday, I went to a coaching call with my coach, and it was kind of an intuitive call. I don't want to go into the details about the call, but she had us do this visualization about the people that are in our lives who represent certain things. So first, she has us think about our competent protector, somebody that represents protection and safety and that kind of thing. And so she's walking us through this visualization, and she said, okay, now I want you to think of somebody who is your cheerleader, somebody that's just there simply to cheer you on. And immediately I thought of Mr. Thornton, and that was kind of interesting to me. He was one of my teachers in middle school and high school. So it's not like I spend a lot of time thinking about him, but I thought it was interesting that he came up as the word cheerleader because he's not like super outgoing, rah type, although he was really good at having fun. So as I reflected on that, I just thought about like, why do I feel like he was a cheerleader for me or is a cheerleader for me? And I think I'm actually going to turn this into a series of episodes because that opened up in my mind several people. Most of them were teachers that I had, and like different things that they did for me, different ways that they were meaningful in my life. And I really want to reflect more deeply on that. And as I started outlining this episode, it got really long. And so I'm just going to focus this episode on Mr. Thornton. So yes, here we go. So I met Mr. Thornton in, I believe it was 8th grade. He was the keyboarding teacher, and I can't remember if I had him for math. If there are any people from growing up from school, send me a message. Let me know where I'm going wrong here. But the details, sometimes I forget. But I know I had several classes with him that year. One of them was a keyboarding class. So kind of interesting. I was born in 1980, kind of on the cusp of, the generations that didn't really know about computers and technology and things like that. But computers and technology were introduced to me kind of halfway through my schooling journey. So it's kind of interesting that I learned how to type in a class at school. My children learned how to type, before 3rd grade. And they were very motivated to learn on their own. And there are like free typing programs now that young children can go to learn how to type, but mostly they learned because they just grew up around computers and had to learn, right? So the thing I remember about this keyboarding class was that Mr. Thornton made it so fun. it could potentially have been a really boring class where we sit there at our keyboards with our piece of cardboard covering up our hands, and he's, speaking out E, E-I, E-N-E, E-T-S. Like, we learned like one letter at a time, basically, and then different letter combinations. And I can only imagine how boring that class must have been for him as the teacher. He would play music. So we would walk into class and there would be some, like, I don't know, oldies or Motown music going on. He just made the environment so fun. Like, and during 7th and 8th grades, our high school was being renovated. And so there was like classroom shuffling and different weird things going on to accommodate all of that. And I remember at one point in his classroom, I'm pretty sure it was during 8th grade, instead of normal tables and chairs, we had like choir risers, just because they had like split the classrooms in half. Anyway, so these are some of the things I remember, but he always made it so fun and so lighthearted. And like, at least for me, I don't know if everyone had this experience with him. He made me feel capable. Like, everyone was capable. Of course, everyone can do fill in the blank, whatever class it was, because in 8th grade, I think I may have also had him for math. Maybe. I know I had him for math in 9th grade in Algebra 1. I think I had him for pre-algebra as well. And I think there was like a history or social studies class that he also taught. As you can see, you're going to learn that I had Mr. Thornton. He like moved up in grades as my class moved up. And so he was a common thread from 8th grade through graduating high school. I had several classes. And so sometimes the details of which class and what year it was and all of that kind of run together. But that's the first thing that I think of when I think of Mr. Thornton. I think of how fun he always made class and how he always had this sort of underlying sense of humor about everything. I remember one time, I don't even remember what it was about, but I was in the hallway and there was a classmate of mine. She was in the same class as me. And I can't remember if he gave her something that he didn't give me, or if it was like a comment on a paper or something. And I was like, hey, that's not fair. And he said, but she's my niece and you're not. And I was like, oh, okay. But I think it was a joke that I just like went over my head and I didn't understand. Anyway, he always had this sense of humor about life in general. It was always fun. Fun is just the best word, but maybe lighthearted. And like, he never took anything too seriously. Now, he did get pretty upset and angry at us at certain times, like when the students were goofing off and not doing their work. Like, he was very much one of those teachers that demanded respect. And when things got off the rails, he would bring us back in. Sometimes he would get very, strict, stern, whatever. But for the most part, everybody respected him and like followed the rules, kind of thing. Later on, as a senior in high school, he was our class advisor. Actually, he was our class advisor the whole time. But because I was valedictorian of my graduating class, I feel like I somehow was in more communication with him because of that. He was the one that probably had to approve my speech. And you know what I realized while I was outlining this episode? My valedictory speech, I didn't want to just stand up and give a normal speech. Plus, I didn't really know what was expected. I had no context of what that speech was really about. And I didn't want to do it alone. So I invited my salutatorian to give a speech with me. So we did like a 2-person speech. And basically we went down memory lane. We just, small town, most of the kids in our graduating class, we were together since 1st grade or very early elementary. And we just talked about each person in the class that was graduating and memories about them. And so I have been looking back at my life and telling stories about my life and other people all the way since high school, since senior year of high school. So that was kind of a fun realization. In ninth grade in Algebra 1, Mr. Thornton was my teacher. And I remember being a little bit nervous, like probably nervous about high school in general, but I, of course, always wanted to be a really good student and excel, and math and sciences always seemed like the place where that was really tested. And we got into the first couple weeks and I was like, oh, this is easy. But the main thing I remember about Algebra 1 and geometry, those were both classes that Mr. Thornton taught, was that his brain and my brain were really similar. I remember thinking that back in high school, like the way I learned and the way he taught just matched up perfectly well. And so I was oftentimes like, he would give a class teaching us a concept or the next lesson or whatever. And I would sit and listen and I would be like, yep, makes sense. And then my friends in the class would turn to me and be like, we don't understand a thing he said. And I was able to bridge the gap between his teaching and where their understanding was lacking. It was this really weird thing. I think it made me appreciate and enjoy those math classes even more. And in fact, there was a moment in geometry. First of all, I want to say a lot of people struggle with geometry. It can be kind of hard. It pushes your brain in a different way. It's been, 20 years or more since I've been in geometry, but now my own children are in high school and going through it. And I'm like being reminded of this. And again, Mr. Thornton made it so fun. We spent so much of geometry class folding origami paper to help us understand about the rules of triangles and ratios and angles and all of that. So I remember being frustrated about that at the time, like, we're not here to play. But that was his thing. Like, how do I make this a real world experience as much as I can? So there was a moment in geometry when he was lecturing, he was teaching us about the lesson. And I kind of looked around the room and everyone was lost. And I wasn't lost. Like I was like, oh, I'm understanding this completely. And he said like the first half of his sentence and then he paused. And in that like just a second or two pause, I just knew what he was going to say, like the exact words that the rest of his sentence was going to be. And then he said it and it was the exact words. And even in that moment, I was like, whoa, that was weird. So it was just confirmed to me over and over again that the way I needed to be taught was the way that he chose to teach. I kind of think that he was pretty good at meeting all the students where they were, but I mean, every teacher has their limitations, right? So we were just a really good match for each other. Senior year, we also had like a government type class that I think was a requirement for all the seniors. And we talked about the economy and the government and like voting and why it's important. And that class, I didn't even remember until I started thinking about this episode, but I realized that he really made me think. He made me think about the real world in a way that related it to myself. He made me think about what do I want and why do I want it? So he was one of those teachers that didn't claim to have all the answers. He, in that way, was very humble, but yet he asked really good, thought-provoking questions. And I think he had a level of respect for the students to honor their humanity and honor their, like where each of us were at in our journeys. The other thing I realized that I hadn't made this connection until today was that he was an alumni of the University of Washington, and I chose to attend the University of Washington. at the time, I wouldn't have said, oh, it's because Mr. Thornton went there that I want to go there. I mean, I knew I wanted to stay in state. I knew that I had to rely upon scholarships or financial aid. So I did apply to a private school and I got in, but the financial aid package was such that it made it a no-brainer for me to go to one of the state schools. So I got into both University of Washington and Washington State University. And when I was like, which one do I feel more drawn to? I was like, UW for sure. And now I'm like, I wonder if that has anything to do with Mr. Thornton. So he went to the University of Washington. He majored in geography, which I thought was really weird when I was in high school. I'm like, who majors in geography? But once I got to college, my eyes were opened a little bit more. And I was like, oh, geography is actually really fun. I took a few classes in that, in geography, some geography classes, and I really, really enjoyed them because geography is more than just like looking at maps and knowing where things physically are in relationship with each other. It's more like it really encompasses more of like a sociology and a just how people move and relate to each other in the earth, right? In the physicality of the earth. So I didn't major in geography, but I majored in psychology, which in so many ways feels adjacent. So what I really wanted to talk about was that the reason why Mr. Thornton was such a meaningful person in my life was that it felt like he just got me. He just understood me. Now, I don't remember any especially personal conversations. I could for sure be wrong about that. It feels like most of our conversations centered around school and assignments, but I do remember being in his classroom like during lunch and him playing music during lunch and like just wanting to be there, him creating an environment that welcomed you in and made you want to be there. I really felt so seen and understood and cared for by him. And one of the reasons was because even though we didn't have any especially personal conversations, about halfway through my senior year of high school, Mr. Thornton approached me and he said, "Hey, you're going to be going to college soon." Like I think it was like January, February timeframe. I had already, it was right after I had gotten accepted into the schools and I had decided to go to UW. And he approached me and he said, "You're going to be going to college soon. Have you thought about whether or not you're going to buy a computer?" And I was kind of surprised. Like it felt like this personal thing that was like a little bit outside the boundaries of our normal relationship. And I hadn't thought about it. I mean, my parents were really poor. They didn't make very much money. And so I wasn't thinking that they would be able to buy me a computer. And I hadn't, high schoolers, teenagers are oftentimes very short-sighted. So I hadn't really thought ahead to that. I was such in the mode of just get to college, get to college, get to college. And then here he is asking me like, "Have you thought about whether or not you want a computer in college?" And I'm like, what? My brain is just like, how do I figure out how, like, is somebody going to drive me there? Where am I going to live? How much is it going to cost? Like all of that stuff. But it felt so like personal and like he was really looking out for me and he cared about not just me as a student in his classes. This is like getting me a little choked up, but me as a person, me in the future, which I have to say is quite a contrast versus what was happening at home, which I don't think he had any clue about, my parents fighting all the time and like it being more like survival mode. Like we didn't have the capacity to think about next week or next month much less like in 6 months or a year, because it was like survive every day. And so him coming to me and asking me that question felt so foreign, so strange. And if you have listened to earlier episodes, you know that my grandparents probably would have filled that role. But at this point in time, I really didn't have much of a relationship with them because of my own guilt and all of that. So it was just so tender to me that he would ask me. And I wouldn't be surprised if he asked other people, but at that moment, it felt like somehow he saw something in me that was special that he wasn't offering to just all of the students, kind of thing. And it felt so much like he met me where I was. It was very like, just let me know. It was just sort of an invitation. And so I asked him some more questions about that. And he said, well, if you want to buy a computer, I get a discount because I'm a teacher and I can help you pick out a computer that would be good for you. Why don't you go home and talk to your parents and ask them if they can help buy you one and what the budget is? So I remember kind of thinking about that and going home probably that same afternoon and saying, hey, mom and dad, Mr. Thornton asked me about a computer in college. And I'm pretty sure also that he made it really clear that I wouldn't need a computer in college, but that it would be really helpful. Because at that point, laptops weren't a thing. This was 1998. Laptops weren't a thing. Of course, smartphones weren't a thing. And lots and lots and lots of students in college would just go to the vast computer labs. And he's like, you don't have to have a computer. It would just be like a convenience thing. It would be really helpful. And so I explained all of that to them. I was always very honest. Remember, like I would give back the 26 cents change. And I said, hey, Mr. Thornton asked me about whether or not I wanted to buy a computer for college. And he would order it for me and get his discount, and then we would pay him back. And I remember my parents kind of like, it was like that awkward moment of silence. And I was like, I totally don't need a computer. It's just like a convenience thing. And then my dad said, yeah, I think we should buy you a computer. Like this can be your graduation gift. And you've worked really hard to get where you are. And so I said, okay, he asked me to ask you about the budget because there are computers at every different price level. And my parents said, how about like $1,000 or $1,200? So that was the budget, pretty normal budget for a computer these days, even. And Mr. Thornton ordered me a computer for about that amount. I don't remember the exact amount. And it was like a big computer with a keyboard and a mouse and everything that I had to take to college. And I was one of the only students that had a computer in my dorm room. So even thinking about that, like I really, really, really didn't need a computer. I don't remember what happened to that computer. Probably got rid of it. Anyway, so that is Mr. Thornton. He got me through a really tough time. I mean, not just him. I did a lot of the work, but he was one of those people that was there in the background, cheering me on, believing in me, giving me tools that I didn't even know I needed. And it is so meaningful to me. I felt so seen and understood. The words I would use now is that he really relied on his intuition. I don't know if everyone else felt that way or if he offered those things for everyone else or not. I mean, every student has sort of their teachers that they really click with, but it was meaningful to me that it felt like he was kind of looking out for me and helping me. Pretty sure he also helped me with applying for colleges and all of that, all the letters of recommendation and the essays and scholarships and all of that. Like I feel like he was just there. I can't remember any specific details about that because it felt like he was always there during all of high school. Like it almost was like, of course, he will always be there. He also graduated from the same high school, and we would always make fun of him. Our high school did this thing where each graduating class had everybody's pictures up in one big frame, and then they would put them up in the halls. So we would go back to class of 1969 to find Mr. Thornton and just wonder and gawk over like how much he had changed in that amount of time. Mr. Thornton, if you ever get a chance to listen to this, I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a wise mentor to a very naive teenage girl, and for all of your questions and your teachings. And honestly, it was less about the content that he taught and more about the person that he was as a model to all of us of a thirst and a passion for learning, and just for being wise citizens in the world. And so I thank him so much. Okay, if you want to stick around after the outro, I'm going to give you a little update on what I'm offering in my business. And so if you're interested, you can stick around for that. And if not, you can just shut it down now. I hope all of you have a Mr. Thornton in your life, and that's enough for now. And so are you. Thank you so much for your honest ratings and reviews. We have a few of them in there. If you would like to be connected to me in more ways, you can join my email list or connect on Instagram at Danita Bremer Coaching. All the links are in the show notes. Until next time, go be you and follow the spirit. Okay, so if you've listened all the way to now, then that means you are interested in knowing what I'm offering in my business right now. And I might do actually a separate podcast episode because it has been a really spiritual and interesting experience getting to this point. But the short of it is that after much meandering and deep inner work on myself, I feel like God has given me this gift of a vision of where I want to take my business, and the gift of basically a whole entire program outlined for me. It's not quite fully outlined, but I feel really led in this direction. And so while like shame and helping people overcome shame will always be a part of what I do, it's just near and dear to my heart. I am shifting slightly to helping Latter-day Saint moms really feel like they're good enough moms. And what my program that I'm opening up now really focuses on is connecting with yourself on a really deep level, connecting with God so that you can connect with your kids. I am learning more and more that if we don't have a really solid foundational relationship with ourselves, that it's hard to have solid relationships with other people. I've thought about like how to describe this, but basically it's like if you do have a lot of shame, if you have that self-judgment, you might find, like I have found, that just mindset coaching doesn't help you shake all of that loose. And so I am bringing in all the things that I've learned in the last year as I've gone really deep into my own work and looking at my past and the traumas and things like that. And I'm bringing in, of course, the mindset work that I'm certified in, but just like some tools that I stumbled upon just from my intuition, like journaling and things like that. I'm putting them all in this program. I really, really want moms, and especially LDS moms, to feel like good moms, to connect with their children on a deep emotional level, to feel like just alive and thriving and fulfilled in their lives. And then there's this piece of being on top of your time and your to-do list. I just think that that goes so much in there. We think as humans that it has a lot to do with what we do and how much we accomplish. And, short story is it's not about that, but that will be a part of it. Um, and my main focus, which actually kind of goes along with this episode, which I didn't plan, is to create a trusting, unconditionally loving, safe relationship for you that you can experience in your body. That then, once you have experienced it, you'll be able to go and offer that to the people in your life that you love. That is what I have found has been the most meaningful, life-changing thing, is really experiencing on a body level some of the tools and concepts. Like it's really easy for people to say, well, just be your own best friend, just love yourself, just have your compassion for yourself. But I don't know, I had a hard time getting there. And so I want to offer, first and foremost, a relationship where you feel nurtured and loved and accepted. And like, I'm your cheerleader. I want to be your Mr. Thornton in your life. So that then once you experience that, then you can go take it out into your world. If you want more details, email me, danita@danitabremmer.com. I'm enrolling now. I have 3 people signed up and I have up to 5 more spots. So the spots are limited. This is a one-on-one program, so private coaching, and it is kind of a beta test of sorts. I have these ideas that I have been coaching people on, but I've never put them into kind of a container that is like, I'm going to walk you through XYZ. And so I do want to sort of test out how to deliver the content, how to set up the coaching container, the coaching relationship. And so I'm offering it at, I think it's a steal, $500 a month or $5,000 for a year. It is a year-long program. And yeah, I just invite you, if this sounds like something you want, if you want to feel like a good mom, if you want to connect with your kids, especially if your kids are teenagers or young adults, when they start kind of going out and being their own people in the world, and you start questioning, well, what am I for? What's my role? Who do they need me to be? That kind of thing. I would love to partner with you and help you through some of that. So danita@danitabremmer.com, or of course you can connect with me on Instagram if that feels like a safer way to do it. I'm at Danita Bremmer Coaching. And I really do encourage you to get on my email list as well. I do some more long form writing there, some more kind of heart to heart, tender, thought-provoking writing there. So if you're interested in that, then yeah, look for the link in the show notes. All right. Until next time, go be you and follow the spirit.